Before we delve into the main story, let's talk about one of the latest patches, hotfix 1.06, which patches out, I think, one of the biggest issues that the game had, which was that your save file could get corrupted if the file size exceeded 8 megabytes, which could happen if you looted or crafted too much, something to do with how the game handles item IDs. And so a lot of people very quickly started to find that their save files got corrupted, especially those who did focus on looting and crafting. With hotfix 1.06, CD Projekt reports here that for PC-specific fixes, they have removed the 8 megabyte save file size limit, and while this won't fix save files that have already been corrupted before the update, it will ensure that from here on out, if you were worried that this might happen and have not been looting or crafting as much, you can now loot and craft to your heart's content, and this should no longer be a problem, assuming this works as intended. Beyond that, we got some quest fixes and some console-specific stability improvements. With that out of the way, let's talk about the main story of today, which is Cyberpunk 2077 sales. We were bound to see sales figures sooner rather than later. We have known that the game had sold 8 million units in pre-orders alone, which is utterly insane. And the figures were actually broken down by CD Projekt's official investor relations page, where they talked about the 8 million pre-orders. They talked about the sales split of 59% on PC and 41% on consoles, which, I actually expected more console sales than PC, but CD Projekt did note that PC players tend to pre-order more than consoles, so they said that as time passes, they expect that gap to close. So I suspect that now that it's been days since the game launched, that the gap might be closer to a 50-50 distribution, but as of pre-orders, this was the distribution. Beyond that, we've got physical versus digital, 26% bought the game physically, 74% digitally, which makes sense when you think about how most pre-orders took place on PC, and PC does not have a physical version, so it makes sense that there's such a disparity given most sales happened on PC. These figures were impressive enough that with just pre-orders alone, Cyberpunk 2077 managed to become the fastest selling PC game of all time, smashing the record set by World of Warcraft Shadowlands not long before. Just to give you specifics, Shadowlands sold 3.7 million units globally on its first full day of launch. The PC version of Cyberpunk 2077, 59% of 8 million would be 4,720,000. So Cyberpunk sold 1 million more on day one than WoW Shadowlands did. Very impressive results, though of course a lot of those pre-orders happened because many didn't know that the game would launch in the unacceptable state that it did on consoles and the still rough state that it did on PC, where the best experience can only happen if CD Projekt polishes things, fixes a lot of the technical issues, and implements certain key features. Which brings us to sales figures as of December 22nd, 2020. CD Projekt on their official website released the following statement for investors, seemingly in an attempt to garner confidence, given that much confidence has been lost not only on the part of customers and media outlets, but also investors who saw this shit show go down. And so this is what CD Projekt had to say. The management board of CD Projekt, with a registered office in Warsaw, hereby announced that based on reports obtained from digital distribution platforms and data collected from physical distributors, it estimates that by December 20th, inclusive, gamers have purchased over 13 million copies of Cyberpunk 2077. This figure represents the estimated volume of retail sales across all hardware platforms, factoring in returns submitted by retail clients in brick and mortar, as well as digital storefronts, i.e. the sell-through figure, less all refund requests emailed directly to the company by the publication date of this report in the framework of the Help Me Refund campaign. So, after the game launched, on top of the pre-orders, the game sold an additional 5 million units, and this all takes into account the refund. So, all of that has been subtracted from the total sales, and we've come up with the final figure of 13 million, which despite the bugs, the controversies, the backlash we have seen against CD Projekt for their deceitful marketing and review process practices, is a damn impressive figure. Few games accomplish this level of sales so quickly. So yeah, this just goes to show how elevated and how high the hype for the game was. And it would seem as though there are plenty of people hoping and willing to wait for fixes, patches that will make this the experience that it should have been at launch. Now, there's one excerpt here that explains why CD Projekt released this statement. It says right here, the management board has decided to disclose the above information in the form of a current report due to its potential impact on investor-related decisions. Investors, as you can tangibly see here in CD Projekt Red's stock, the confidence from investors has waned. So from December 14th all the way to December 21st, the stock dipped by a whopping 42%. That's hundreds of millions of dollars in value lost. And beyond that, we are seeing stock stabilize, but it is still not where one expected it to be. A lot of investors expected stock to skyrocket with an incredibly successful launch, but there've obviously been a few roadblocks along the way, and some investors feel as though they were deceived enough that there are some who are organizing a class action lawsuit against CD Projekt. We'll see whether that actually goes anywhere, but I reported on that a couple days ago. As for how investors and analysts have reacted to CD Projekt revealing this 13 million sales figure, apparently analysts expected more from Cyberpunk. So this is an article released by news outlet Bloomberg on December 22nd, 2020, whose headline reads, Cyberpunk fails to deliver again as game sales disappoint. It is insane to think that a game that has sold 13 million copies in just 10 days could disappoint investors, but keep in mind that for investors, for a lot of these companies, it's not about raw sales figures, it's about whether a game exceeds or falls below par what they expected to sell. And so Cyberpunk apparently was expected to sell more than 13 million by December 20th. So scrolling down here, the article emphasizes that the sales figures, despite how vast they are, despite breaking all kinds of sales records, were still lower than expected and disappointed analysts and prompted concern about the timing of future releases. So that's another thing, the fact that so much of the focus is going to be on fixing the game, that upcoming new content like DLCs, expansions, and the multiplayer mode, all of that no doubt is going to get pushed back by at least a couple months, maybe a year. Who knows, depends on how long CD Projekt takes to fix the base game. It is mentioned how Sony pulled the title from PlayStation Store and are offering refunds, and Microsoft also is offering full refunds. These are all factors that investors are considering. While we have seen a huge spike in sales, the fact that the game's no longer being sold on PlayStation Store is going to have a substantial effect on potential sales of the game, and the fact that refunds are so wide open right now and people can just get guaranteed refunds for the title, and the fact that so many people are bound to issue refunds because of how rough the game is technically right now, especially on consoles. There's been a huge markdown in what the game is now expected to sell after the dust has settled. So Morgan Stanley downgraded the stock to equal weight from overweight following the sales update. And here's a statement from a Morgan Stanley analyst. It's difficult to believe CD Projekt has the capacity to deliver as heavy a slate of new content as we previously expected. Delay of that future content also means delayed revenue stream, which is what a lot of analysts and investors are concerned about now. And apparently the most important near-term issue for the analyst is the timeline to fixing Cyberpunk bugs. As for what was the expected sales figure for the game on the part of analysts, apparently those who were surveyed estimated the game would sell 16.4 million copies by December 24th. It doesn't seem likely that the game will sell an additional 3.4 million units in just the span of 4 days. A lot of analysts certainly don't expect that's going to be the case, and so that's why they've lowered their expectations. In addition, Bloomberg adds that the sales number amounts to about half of the 12-month sales sales forecast in a Bloomberg survey of 9 analysts, which was taken before Sony removed the game from its store. As for how many refunds were issued, CD Projekt hasn't provided an official figure, but an analyst predicts that that number may be sitting at roughly 3 million units, with net sales rising to 14.5 million by the end of 2020 and to 30.5 million by the end of next year. So that's what's expected from the title. 3 million in refunds is substantial. If it wasn't for those refunds, CD Projekt Red could have surpassed the expectation of 16.4 million by December 24th, assuming that this information from the analyst is true. But again, we have no official figures on that front from CD Projekt. But the analyst has a quote here, which reads, "It seems that most of the refunds have already happened and that risk is now gone. Sales could speed up once the company releases new patches in January and February and once the game is reinstated in Sony's store. However, one needs to bear in mind that the further away from launch day, the lower the price for the game." So basically, time is of the essence. CD Projekt Red has to fix their game as fast as possible, get the game back online on the PlayStation Store as fast as possible to capitalize on that launch period, which tends to be the first few months of a game's launch. The further you get away from that, the more the interest surrounding a game diminishes, conversation shifts to other titles, and that's sales that are going to be missed. Other analysts weighed in. One said that expecting the game's sales figures to reach 14 million to 15 million by year end, that's too high of an expectation. And this individual had this statement to provide: "While the number ranks Cyberpunk as one of the top-selling titles this year, it implies lower PC sales or higher refunds on console than we anticipated. We note that more refunds could still flow in." So at the end of the day, we're looking at a situation where Cyberpunk has sold incredibly well, but not as incredibly as it could have had the game simply shipped in a state that was acceptable, in a state that they promised, stating that, the game would be out when it's finished. It'll be out when it's ready. That was the motto of the game for years and years. The game obviously didn't live up to that. And that's what kills me about leadership's decision to just launch Cyberpunk 2077 when it wasn't ready to be launched. They could have delayed this an extra year and it would have done similar, if not significantly better sales figures had the game launched the way it was intended, in the state that it should have. Without all of this negative backlash, without the game getting pulled from the PlayStation Store, without all of this talk about their marketing practices and the way they manipulated the review process, we wouldn't be seeing all of these mass refunds happening. The discourse could be significantly more positive, and we could be looking at higher initial sales figures. But this is the current reality, and only time will tell if CD Projekt will somehow make it up to us, if they'll find a way to recoup the huge amount of trust and reputation that they've lost. We'll have to wait and see if Cyberpunk 2077 will end up having a long tail in terms of sales, and it'll keep selling consistently over the course of years and rack up sales numbers to, 30 million, 40, 50 million even. A lot of it will depend on just how well they do with the post-launch stuff, how well and how quickly and swiftly they can fix the base game, and how compelling the upcoming content, the free DLCs, the paid expansions, and the multiplayer mode, how compelling those end up being. I do think it is very possible for Cyberpunk 2077 to come back in a big way. If No Man's Sky can come back the way it did, I certainly do think that Cyberpunk has that potential, given that at the core of it all, there is a gem there hidden in all of this rubble. I had a great time with the game despite the technical issues that disrupted the experience and diminished my experience, which is what is so heart-crushing about all of this. I'll say what I said before with other AAA game launches, especially live services like Marvel's Avengers and Fallout 76 and Anthem. Those are games that even if you were to fix the technical issues, for me the substance just isn't there, and I wouldn't go back to those games because the substance of those titles just feel incredibly bland. Whereas with Cyberpunk, it does feel like there's clearly substance there that just needed more time in the oven to bake. And so if over the next few months, CD Projekt Red can really make the substance that's there kind of come to the surface and really shine as it should have had the game been delayed by 6 months to a year, then maybe the game can really come back. But it's an if at the moment. You know, it's hard to tell what the future holds for the title. I do wish the devs, especially who were screwed by leadership decision, the best of luck in bringing this back, turning the conversation around. But for now, this is the reality of the situation. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on the investors' reaction and the current sales figures that have been revealed for Cyberpunk and what your experience has been like with the title. Drop a comment, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.